Welcome to the Physics of D&D Spells. In this series, we will take Dungeons & Dragons magic and view it, or perhaps break it, with real-world science concepts. Every week, I'll be analyzing a new slice of the spell list, what these spells would actually do, how much energy they manipulate, and whether they're secretly terrifying once real math is applied. This is an ongoing series, and today we'll be covering Abjuration spells levels 2 and 3. I'll have a link to the previous episode for spell levels 0 and 1 in the description down below. In that video, we use fall damage to determine that one in-game hit point roughly equals 600 joules of energy. This figure is quite important because most spells will be broken down using this figure as a basis. The order we're using to determine which spells are next is the spell school alphabetically, then spell level lowest to highest. Note, not every spell in D&D can be broken down cleanly. Some are too abstract, too narrative, or too magical to convert into anything objective. But for those that do make sense, we'll be going all in. And hey, if you enjoy this kind of nerdy overthinking, hit subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss the next episode. Alright, with that, let's get started with the Physics of D&D Spells, School 1, Episode 2, Abjuration, Levels 2 and 3. Aid is very simple. You choose up to 3 creatures within 30 feet. Each target's hit point maximum, and current hit points increase by 5 for 8 hours. This would mean that each target of the spell would essentially add a full commoner's hit points onto their own, which is sort of wild. Regardless, this effect could be the targets getting physically reinforced by the spell, granting them extra durability that roughly equates to 3,000 joules of extra defense per target, 9,000 joules total. What this actually means on a smaller scale isn't really known. Is it making your skin physically harder? Maybe your skin and bones are reinforced. Perhaps it's not exactly durability related and it's making it so your body can clot faster, resist going into shock, or maybe even make you react faster to attacks. This spell also scales so that at higher levels, more HP is added, 5 per spell level above 2nd. So at 5th level, each creature has plus 20 max hit points, or 12,000 joules resisted damage, and at 9th level, each creature has plus 40 max hit points, or 24,000 joules of resisted damage. Meaning, at the higher end, Aid provides enough physical defense to casually stop an 800 grain 50 BMG out of a 45-inch barrel and still have a few thousand joules of energy left over. Personally, I believe that Aid is a form of physical reinforcement, perhaps tougher skin and stronger bones. I think this because you could target a creature with next to no AC and very little ability to dodge, yet they can still benefit from Aid. Additionally, Aid can save you from a fall that would be typically deadly, falling being something that you can't really block or dodge to reduce incoming damage. In conclusion, Aid is a 2nd level spell that can, at the low end, add more than a full human's level of durability to 3 creatures of your choice, and at the high end, stop rounds that would obliterate an engine block in one hit. The PHB 24 says that you touch a closed door, window, gate, container, or hatch and magically lock it for the duration. This lock can't be unlocked by any non-magical means. You and any creatures you designate when you cast this spell can open and close the object despite the lock. You can also set a password that, when spoken within 5 feet of the object, unlocks it for 1 minute. Sounds like something too simple for me to cover, right? Wrong. Unlike its 2014 appearance, 2024 Arcane Lock doesn't say that the locked object can be broken to bypass the lock spell. Therefore, this brings me to the conclusion that this spell can potentially make a door indestructible. Well, of course, this is just interpretation, but honestly it's more fun to interpret bad writing to be even worse. In other words, I'm about to intentionally abuse minor gaps in the writing, like how some D&D TikTok creators make videos about how X spell can insta-kill a BBEG. Not naming names here. Either way, unbreakable door or not, this is still pretty interesting. It could be that the internals of the lock are made unpickable. The lock of a door is often broken to literally unlock the door, so it could be interpreted as making just the lock invulnerable, or it could just make the whole door unbreakable, because by breaking the door, you've just made the door unlocked or not need a lock, therefore no lock, and Arcane Lock has failed. Take a shot every time I say lock. Regardless, if it doesn't make the door indestructible, it's a useless spell anyway, because it takes 25 gold pieces of gold dust to cast, way too expensive for something that doesn't make stuff unbreakable. In conclusion, either this spell is overpriced garbage that makes a door only unpickable, but still seems very easy to bypass, or it is well worth magic that can make an entryway unbreakable, so you may sleep in peace. Though, one interpretation certainly requires more stretching. And if you think I'm exaggerating about the price, Fireball is like some sulfur and bat guano, I think, right? You touch a creature and end the poison condition on it. For the duration, the target has advantage on saving throws to avoid or end the poison condition, and it has resistance to poison damage. Now, I'm not a toxicologist, but even I know that poisons and venoms work in wildly different biochemical ways. Hemotoxin breaks blood, neurotoxins block nerves, cytotoxins melt tissue, cardiotoxins hijack your heart, and that's just within animal venom, never mind industrial poison, plant alkaloids, heavy metals, synthetic neuroagents, and whatever the DM decides poison damage is. In reality, neutralizing one toxin takes specific binding proteins and targeted deactivation mechanisms, not a one-size-fits-all antidote. This suggests that any foreign substance that is both harmful and not living is targeted by this spell. The not living part is because this specifically doesn't prevent diseases of any kind, just poisons and venoms. Therefore, I believe that the initial effect of ending the poison condition instantly breaks down substances that follow the aforementioned conditions. Afterwards, it makes poisons 50% as potent as before. From there, we can take two paths. Either A, this prolonged resistance effect is biological, with the spell strengthening your immune system, or B, the prolonged resistance is magical and simply does not require concentration, unlike the other protection from X spells. Of course, many spells have a prolonged effect without concentration, so it's not like there isn't precedent for spells to have such a feature, and personally, I feel as though this is the more likely option. However, I will still cover the enhanced immune system option. First, it's unlikely that your immune system itself is bolstered because you have no greater resistance to diseases once this spell is cast, and it's not as though this spell gave your immune system the proteins, enzymes, antibodies, whatever, to fight off literally every single poison and venom to exist and yet to exist. Probably. Those are the two ways this resistance could be explained biologically rather than magically. Having the method to break down every poison and venom, or simply having such a strong immune system that it could fight off anything. So, protection from poison is either a biochemical impossibility, or a magical firewall that tells every toxin to do half damage and sit in the corner. Counterspell and Dispel magic, two effects that I believe function through very similar mechanisms. Therefore, this episode is granted a freebie spell. Regardless, here's the effects. Counterspell reads, you attempt to interrupt a creature in the process of casting a spell. The creature makes a Constitution saving throw. On a failed save, the spell dissipates with no effect, and the action, bonus action, or reaction used to cast it is wasted. If that spell was cast with a spell slot, the slot isn't expended. And Dispel magic reads, choose one creature, object, or magical effect within range. Any ongoing spell of level 3 or lower on the target ends. For each ongoing spell of level 4 or higher on the target, make an ability check using your spellcasting ability, DC 10 plus that spell's level. On a successful check, the spell ends. Using a higher level spell slot, you automatically end a spell on a target if the spell's level is equal to or less than the level of the spell slot you use. Let's get right into this. Obviously, both have some component of anti-magic, hence them being together. I can pack them together because rather than talk about the spells very specifically, I'll blanketly talk about the concept of anti-magic. We know that the weave is an energy that can be interacted with directly, and we call that manipulation magic. So I would imagine that since magic can be shaped and interacted with, someone could use a small, localized wave to disrupt magic. Think about magnetism. To cast a spell, you must take your magnet and interact with another magnet. However, if one were to use their own magnet to make some magnetic interference, then they could cause the interaction to fail. Similar to the spell level idea, if one party had a larger magnet, they could probably have the interaction go in their favor. Therefore, Counterspell is somewhat like someone attempting to use something magnetic, and you alter that by also creating a magnetic field. Dispel magic is more like there's a constant field, and you hold a magnet to it for a moment to damage or destroy it. Think about what happens when you hold a powerful magnet to some electronics. My point being, these spells are simply field interference with somewhat different mechanisms. One is more of a momentary pulse, used as another pulse is made, the inciting pulse needing to be highly specific is easier to jam, while the other one is more of a dissolution of a constant field. Meanwhile, magic itself is, cellular signal or something. Magic is everywhere, but generally requires super specific methods to actually interact with it, like a code. But anti-magic just adds or takes away some numbers, so your data isn't accepted by the cell tower or satellite, basically turning your sent data into corrupt packets. Therefore, the signal isn't read. I really tried to make this metaphor work, I swear. I'm absolutely not going to read out all of Glyph of Warding, but I'll give you a quick version. Make a rune on a surface, select a trigger, then determine if you'd like the glyph to be an explosive rune or a spell storing rune. Rune explodes for 5d8 damage, and the spell storing glyph can hold a single spell of the same level or lower than the Glyph of Warding that targets one creature or an area. Today I'll focus on the explosive rune, but I guess when I get around to the other spells, you could view them as being able to be cast through the glyph too. The explosive rune can either deal acid, cold, fire, lightning, or thunder damage upon activation. Needless to say, but that's a lot to cover, so I'll try and keep this somewhat reasonable in length. Acids that can deal 5d8 damage with a neat little splash are obviously not normal acids, as that much damage would be enough to dissolve you or me, an average of 5.625 times in 6 seconds or less. So basically, with a single splash of this acid, you die in a single second. That's some Looney Tunes acid. For comparison, this acid would likely instantly destroy a resilient 10-foot by 10-foot horse-drawn cart. Cold would be pretty insane. 13,500 joules of energy drained from each person within 20 feet. Drained because cold is just absence of energy. Therefore, cold damage is damage from losing energy. 13,500 joules is roughly enough energy lost to flash freeze about 30 grams of water, except that water is your blood plasma and intracellular fluid. Skin goes gray, extremities go brittle, and cells rupture as ice crystals form inside them. Your fingers wouldn't get frostbitten, they'd shatter like frozen Doritos. On the opposite extreme, 13,500 joules of fire, as expected, would really deal some damage. Assume an equal amount over the front of the body and an exposure time of 0.05 seconds, that's roughly 300 kilowatts per meter squared. Just 80 kilowatts per meter squared is essentially instant second degree burns. At 300 kilowatts per meter squared and such low exposure time, you may not actually feel the pain. Your nerves would be burnt too badly. You'd look horrible, with a full body third degree burn, severely damaged lungs from inhaling, throat and nasal cavity closed due to swelling, also inhalation, and eyes too damaged to see. You may not even have consciousness due to temperature, but if you did, you'd definitely hear your body crackling. 13,500 joules of electricity is like 84 defibrillators smacking you at once. Quite bad. Don't really think I need some super long explanation of how bad it would be to be lit up by 84 defibs. I guess I could compare it to something like if you touched a typical transmission line in your neighborhood at 12.47 kilovolts for 0.075 seconds while properly grounded. Or if you had 13 to 17 seconds of the energy used by a toaster dumped into you in a few milliseconds. Thunder damage is also a really bad day for the recipient, as 13,500 joules of energy like this would collapse your lungs, damage your brain, explode your eardrums, and probably harm other squishy bits on your insides. Thunder damage is really bad news. Quite a lot of variety on the ways you can make a healthy man no longer healthy using this nice little glyph. So that's this episode's breakdown of low-level abjuration magic through the lens of physics. From enhanced physiology to magical interference, there's a surprising amount going on under the hood, and we've just started. If you thought this was a good take, subscribe for more creature reworks, weird biology dives, and other sciencey ventures. If you thought it sucked, fair, I'll try harder next time. Got ideas for future videos? Toss them in the comments below. Either way, thanks for watching, have a great day, and I'll see you next time.